Hello, everyone. This is a Cluster API office hour meetings. Today is Wednesday, 6th of July. Before starting, some notes. So if you want to speak, you have to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, which is near reactions. I will do my best to keep an eye on the participant list, and otherwise please help me find out if some raise is ended. If you have some topic to discuss, please feel free to add them to the agenda. I've posted the agenda links in chat. If you don't have access to the document, you have to join the SIG Cluster Lifecycle mailing list. Okay, so let's start with today's agenda. So, host, I'm me. Please add your name in the participant list. Okay, let's keep moving. So, as usual, at the beginning of the meeting, we give a room to new attendees to introduce themselves, why they are interested in API and so forth. So, or just say hello. And I stop for a few seconds for the new attendees to speak. Okay, since there are no new attendees this week, if someone join later, feel free to speak up as well. Let's go to open proposal readout. So, how can we do? Is there someone that want to give some update on some proposals? Jack, please.
I will give a brief update on the Cluster API add-on orchestration proposal. So the work that we've been doing to define the spec has been in the Google Doc that Fabrizio is now opening and sharing. And this has sort of stabilized. We've got a lot of comments, but we're not getting new participation. So what we are going to propose to do is to sort of mark this as read-only at the end of the week. And if feel free to reach out to myself and Fabrizio if you feel like you want to add something, say next week. We can be flexible on that. But next week, I'll work with Jonathan and Fabrizio to essentially migrate this into a PR form into the CAPI repo, where we can do the next phase of outlining what this is going to look like and solicit more feedback from the community. So just more of a heads up than anything.
Okay, looks great. We should also close all the solved comments before moving it, so that it is easier if we look back.
Great.
Okay, if there are no comments on this PR, someone else want to talk about some other proposals? Okay, let's move on. Discussion topics. Discussion topics. So I have the first one. I want to give a brief update on release 1.2. So the current plan, pending provider feedback, is to cut a first RC next Monday, 11/7, and to cut the final release 18/7, so that in 2 weeks basically. Currently, we know that some providers are testing. We don't have feedback of problems. So we think that this is sustainable, but please speak up if you see that this roadmap is too aggressive or not. Moving on, what means RC1 for us? It means that basically we start the code freeze, or you can call it feature. Okay, Jack is telling that CapZ copy test looks good. Thank you for the feedback. So I was explaining code freeze means that we go in a phase where we stabilize the release, so we limit backward as much as possible, only to basically fixes if required, or small documentation improvement, stuff like that. But yeah, we go basically for stabilization. Notable changes in that will go in V1.2 RC1 are: we are going to bump controller runtime to 0.12.3, which is not yet out, but yeah, we are working with the controller runtime team to get it out. This includes an improvement on custom webhooks that I'm going to explain in a second. And also, I would like to point out that this release has a user-facing documentation for runtime SDK. So you will find documentation about implementing runtime extension, implementing lifecycle hooks, topology mutation hooks, and also documentation for the operator about how to manage how to deploy runtime extension in a cluster. So kudos to Stefan and the team who worked to this PR. What is super important is that with 1.12 1.2 RC1, there is a new required change for providers. This change must be implemented in the webhooks only if they are enforcing template immutability. So the change is documented. I will briefly go through documentation that also show what are the expected changes. So the problem that we faced is that basically when doing server-side apply, we were dry running changes on templates, but the infrastructure and booster provider have implemented immutability checks. The webhook were failing, were returning an error even if we were dry running. And so in order to avoid this, what we are proposing, I show an example, a diff from CapD that probably will simplify. What we are proposing is that provider, in this case is CapD, they have to switch their validation webhook from the default validation webhook that controller runtime support to the custom validation webhook that was introduced a couple of releases ago. Custom, in order to use custom validator, what we have to do, how do you register? So first of all, you have to introduce a new type, which is basically the webhook type. How do you register the webhook is slightly different. The signature of the method is slightly different. But the interesting part is that we got context and in the context, and we can use the context in order basically to get the admission request from the context, and we can use the admission request in order to check if this operation was an actual dry run executed by the topology controller. So that means that we are going to skip the immutability checks only if we are dry running and it is the topology controller that is dry running. Everything else will behave as expected. So kubectl dry run, kubectl apply, etc., will behave as of today. So yeah, the change is not big. Is I don't know, 15 lines of code. And yeah, we hope that this does not create too much annoyance for the provider. You can yeah, ping me, Stefan, Kilian, Christian, if you need clarification. And I stop to see if there are questions. Okay, so it seems that there are no questions. As usual, we are available in Slack if you need our help. Before today, I had a discussion with Stefan that I would like to raise in this meeting. Discussion is about one PR, which is the PR for adding the types from the IPAM proposal to cluster API. So this PR is still being working. There is a couple of questions pending, but it is also, let me say, not so far from the finish line. So we have a couple of options in front of us. So we can try to squeeze this PR in the RC1. So that means finish the PR by this week. This requires more eyes. So we will kindly ask people to take a look. And the advantage will be that we will get IPAM types and the IPAM work can move on in a patch release for of 1.2 series. In the opposite of the spectrum is that, okay, given that we are a little bit late in the cycle, etc., we have to we decide to punt basically the addition of this type to 1.3.0. That means that the IPAM work will start somewhere in I don't know, later this year. We don't have yet a planning for 1.3. Which is not ideal, given that there is consensus on the IPAM proposal, and I know there is interest from some provider to have it. There is a middle ground that we can consider if there is community agreement. That is to make an exception to our backporting rules and basically allow to cherry pick this PR sometime in 1.1. It is an exception. I think that it is for good, and my personal preference goes to this option. But yeah, this is making exception is something that we discussed in the past, and we kind of agreed to limit them as much as possible. So I would like to hear others' opinions. Cecile.
Hi. Yeah, I personally don't think we should make an exception for a change this big that is adding like a feature. It's obviously not a bug fix. It's an extra large PR. It's adding API types. I think it's clearly out of the exception rules that we defined. And I think this is why it's so important that we really get on a release cadence where when something misses the deadline, it's not the end of the world and we can just get on the next one. I think why there's a fear right now that we punted to 1.3, it's a bad thing. It's because we have no guarantee when 1.3 is going to come. But if we know 1.3 is coming in, let's say 3 months or 2 months or whatever it is, I think it's a lot easier to have that commitment that that's when it's going to be in there. And I don't think squeezing it into 1.2 is a good option either. Like in general, that just, you know, squeezing a change in there and trying to pressure reviewers is not a good practice. So personally, my opinion is that we should punt it to 1.3 and we should, you know, do things well, take the time to have a proper code review and think about how we can improve our guarantees around release timelines so that we don't have this issue, because this is going to keep coming up. It's not a one-off thing.
Thank you. Some other opinions? Yeah, I think that I kind of agree. At the same time, I'm aware that, Vince, Jacob, do you want to speak up instead of writing in chat? So maybe we can have a discussion.
Sure. My point is like pretty simple. Like we don't have enough people that like are committing to do the work, like just, you know, plain and simple, to have like a scheduled release cadence, especially with, you know, everything that's happening like in the industry. We should probably be a little bit more flexible, unless like folks are ready to just, you know, volunteer to have like a release team like Kubernetes has. Just my 2 cents.
So my argument would be that it's marked as experimental. So maybe that helps regarding making an exception for 1.2.1. The main reason I would like to get it into a release is that would help with provider implementation, especially on the infrastructure provider side, because providers probably don't want to tag unreleased code base. And it would help to have it in any release, even if it's a patch release, to just be able to properly upgrade to that code base and then be able to do also experimental, potentially at least, implementation on the provider side to also be able to test it more like in an integrated way to also see if it works properly with providers and so on. So to make any significant progress on the provider side, from my point of view, it's somewhat required to have it in some release, unless you want to do a lot of work in branches in parallel to the main branch of providers and so on. Promoting it to the non-experimental API would of course be a proper minor release at least, but my argument would be that adding experimental APIs could be a reasonable exception for patch releases as well.
Okay, I'll just continue. Would it help if we have a very early alpha release of 1.3.0 like Kubernetes has? So basically, once they do their release, they immediately release the alpha release of the next version. I mean, it would give you a tag. It wouldn't give you a like stable and very, I don't know, well-tested release or something, but it would give you a tag that you can pick up.
I guess that's up to the providers then if they want to immediately move the main branch to alpha release for the next version or not.
Okay, so trying to summarize, I think that, let me say, I'm there is really only one open comment in the PR so far. Usually we give some more time to people to chime in and review API. I think that, let me say, if we address the comment, and given that the API is being discussed at length in the proposal, I think that we are still it will be still possible to get this done by Monday. So if we are comfortable to merge it, I think that we solve all the problems. Cecile?
Yeah, I think the fact that it is experimental does, I think, change in this particular instance. I didn't realize that at first. I thought it wasn't an experimental type, but I think regardless, we need to talk about this because I don't think this is going to be an isolated instance. Like this is going to happen again in the future where things are going to be like slipping up like the release deadline, and there's always going to be like a good reason for getting it out there sooner than later. So yes, if we can like solve it in this particular instance by merging it, that's great, but I still think we need to think about the overall, like what is our strategy for when something misses the release. And I think what Vince brought up, also we need to talk about like the fact that we feel like we don't have enough people to do releases. That's a problem. I feel like that's a pretty important aspect of the health of the project. And I think Fabrizio, you had brought up at one point doing a V team for the releases. I think that was a really great idea. We should revisit that and see if we can get that, maybe some interest from folks in the community on doing that.
Yeah, I'm totally in trying to do this. Honestly, I would like to experiment on a release cadence. I will. As soon as we get this release out, I will start. Let's start simple, 3 releases per year like Kubernetes, and see if we can basically keep up with our promises. We are experimenting. I'm confident that we can do it, but yeah, we have to have more people rotating on release duties. I think that this, let me say, release cadence needs deserve a discussion. Probably as soon as a release out, we have to take a decision as a community. What is the next release planning? We do a time boxed release or a best effort release as we are doing today. And we keep a decision and we try to stick it to it. Okay. So for this topic, IPAM, I think that there is a kind of agreement in best course will be get this merged. If this is not possible, we cut an early tag, which is a good compromise. And then we have to schedule some discussion soon about next release date. Is that a good summary? Okay, C+1, thumbs up. Okay, thank you everyone for the nice discussion. I have also the next point. So I've opened an issue, and this is also related to how do we manage stuff and release management. So I'm proposing a change on how do we perform issue triage and milestone management. Yes, the change is described in the. Okay, so I see already some comment. So the idea, I'm just let me say raising our awareness. I will take a look at the comment. So the idea is that we have to stop to assign the current milestone to new issues as a signal for triaged, because assign an issue to a milestone today really does not mean that it will be implemented. So it is a signal that someone looking at our backlog from outside could be confused. If I look at issue today, if I look at issues, I look at milestones for the release that we are going to cut. There are 171 issue open, but yeah, no one never believed that this will be merged. So this is not, let me say, a nice signal for people looking at our backlog. So the idea is that stop assigning milestone as a signal for triage, and instead start using triage labels. So when an issue gets created, it gets the need triage label, and then maintainers take a look and remove needs triage and add new labels accordingly. This is the first point. Second point is yeah, triage. They added triage accepted or triage need information, etc., etc. It is described. I have described all the issue in the PR that I cannot find. Yeah, these are the options, the label available in Kubernetes today. Okay, the next point, here it is, back to the PR. Yeah, the next proposal is to start adding issue to the milestone only when there is someone who expressed the intent to work before the deadline. So if we go back to milestone, we will have less issue assigned to the next milestone, and when we have, let me say, at least an intent that the things will be worked, and so we can eventually start using projects, etc., etc. And the last point is to drop milestone next. Milestone next is, let me say, a bucket that we use today to keep track of things that we are not going to, yeah, we consider things in the far future. To be honest, I think that milestone next for me seems like triage accepted, but no milestone. But yes, so this is my proposal. If you have opinions, please go and comment on this issue. I thank you, Cecile, for his first round of feedbacks. Opinions? Okay, so yeah, we're looking forward for this one. There are no other topic in the agenda. Some last minute topics? Okay, we are some time back. Have a nice Wednesday. See you next week.